Perhaps the greatest evidence that the old world order is being intentionally allowed to decay is the testimony of a medical doctor I met in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in early 1989 during a speaking engagement. This doctor met me after the speech and told me an incredible story. He told me that he was a pediatrician and that he had interned at a hospital in Pittsburgh in 1965. He told me that the doctor who was the head of his department became a good friend of his during the time they worked together. That doctor's name, the second doctor's name, was Richard L. Day, also a pediatrician. A short time later, sometime in 1965, Dr. Day left the hospital and became the National Medical Director of Planned Parenthood in New York City. He held this job for 3 years, quitting in 1968 to become a professor of pediatrics at a New York university. In March of 1969, Dr. Day came back to Pittsburgh and gave an address to the Pittsburgh Pediatric Society. This is the announcement of that meeting in the bulletin of the Allegheny County Medical Journal, and that's Dr. Day's speech circled in about the top half. And this is the copy of Dr. Day's obituary after he died in June of 1989. Dr. Day gave a speech entitled Family Planning, Infant Mortality, Gene Frequency, Abortion, and Other Considerations. He quickly made it known that he was not there to talk about medical problems because he wanted to talk about, quote, other considerations, unquote. After getting past the amenities, he started his speech by making this comment. I am going to talk about some of the things that I learned about during my 3 years in New York. If I see anyone tape recording my message, I will walk off the stage. If I see anyone making any notes, I will walk off the stage and not continue. If anyone says that I said anything that I tell you today, I will publicly disavow your statement and deny that I said it. And in fact, even if you do speak about what you'll hear today, no one will believe you anyway. After Dr. Day completed his speech, the doctor telling me the story told me that he went out to his car and wrote down every comment that he could remember about what Dr. Day had said. He also said that as thoughts and recollections have occurred to him since then, he has written them down. This doctor sent me a tape of his recollections, and what he remembered will be what I will be sharing with you today. Dr. Day said that he had found an organized force during his stay in New York City. This organized force is the force behind communism. This, of course, is not a new revelation, because this is precisely what Dr. Carroll Quigley taught President Bill Clinton, and I have known this was true for some 30 years. I want you to remember that these comments that we're now going to talk about were made in 1969, over 25 years ago, by a man who apparently had been made aware of them by the very people who were making the changes. The doctor went on in his speech, this organized force is so powerful that it fears no one or anything. This organized force believes that no one can stop it. And then the doctor started telling the audience what he had discovered. The doctor telling the story said that these remembered thoughts are not in any particular order, but are listed in the order that he remembered them. Each is just a short sentence explaining in concise form what the doctor said. This is what the doctor told the audience on March the 20th, 1969, in no particular order. He said there is a timetable constructed by those inside this organized force. Suicide will be promoted in its own right. He's talking about the future, of course. There will be a planned economic collapse of the United States to further the acceptance of the global system. The population must be limited to 2 children per family. The government will promote contraception by making it universally acceptable. He said this in 1969. Sex outside of marriage will be promoted. He went on to say that men would become more feminized and women more masculine. Sex would be more out in the open and encouraged outside of marriage. Travel would become a privilege to increase control of individuals and families. Bridges and roads would be allowed to deteriorate. We would become desensitized to violence. Musicians would use coded messages to reach the young people. He went on to say terrorism would increase so that the public would relinquish control of their lives to an increasing government. Abortion will become normal and tax supported. Fathers would have no say in the abortion issue. He said this 3 years before the Roe versus Wade decision making abortion was legal. Homosexuality will be encouraged. Ultimately, reproduction will be without sex, meaning it will all be done in test tubes. Divorce will be more prevalent. Living with your partner would become preferred. Women will be encouraged to work outside the family. Men will be constantly transferred by their companies to produce tension within the family. When I told this to a friend of mine who worked for IBM, he told me that he now understood why his fellow engineers joked that IBM meant, quote, "I've been moved," unquote. Euthanasia, meaning the killing of old people, will become common. They will be declared to not be useful anymore in the new society. Costs of medical care will increase so that old people cannot obtain it. Medicine will become tightly controlled. If you don't have a job, you won't be able to get medical attention. Medical care will be keyed to your job. If you have a job, you will get medical attention. Going to a hospital will become a privilege, not a right. Later, only those with medical insurance will be allowed into a hospital. Hospitals will be used to confine criminals as a way of using drugs and chemicals to alter their behavior. Doctors will become employees of companies, no longer to be considered as the employee of the patient. Soon, listen to this, soon new diseases will appear for which there will be no cure. He said this years before, AIDS was intentionally created by the World Health Organization. That's a whole other subject, one of which I won't cover in this lecture today. But that's true. AIDS was a man-created disease, and it sounds like Dr. Day was predicting it back in 1969. He went on to say that the purpose of these new diseases will be to reduce the population. He also went on to say that religion will be destroyed. He commented that the Bible will be rewritten with key words changed or altered. Education will slowly reduce the amount of information transmitted. Kids will not learn as much. The school year will be prolonged, including the teaching of students during the summer. Not everyone will be allowed to own books. He went on to say the government will be getting into gambling. The drug use will increase with the purpose of increasing law enforcement. He said music will become worse with the specific purpose of changing the thoughts of the listeners. Identification will become required with something being implanted in the hand or forehead of every American. I'll be specifically showing you in a few more minutes that the latest technology in this field is just around the corner. Dr. Day continued, food consumption will be reduced so that its distribution will have to be controlled, and no fugitive from justice will be able to get food. Weather will become controllable to cause droughts and floods to reduce the food supply. He said world government will occur with an increase in the power of the United Nations. Inflation of the money supply would lead to a single banking system. Taxes would become progressive, meaning that the rich will be taxed to a higher degree so that few could assemble wealth. Credit would be extremely available so that many will go into heavy debt. Private ownership of housing will cease. High costs of housing would prevent new purchasers from buying homes. Census information would provide personal information. The number of bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms, etc. will become part of the census information. He said this in 1969. Real-life heroes who exemplify old-fashioned values will disappear. Entertainers and celebrities, rather than the national heroes of the past, would be promoted as the heroes of children because they would advocate a wide-open lifestyle. And I want you to remember, as I said several times during that explanation, that these comments were made in 1969, over 25 years ago. I think that you can see that as I read them, most of these comments have come true. So it appears as if Dr. Day was telling us the truth. We might remember that the doctor said identification will become required with something being implanted in the head, or the hand rather, or forehead of every American. And I would now like to take a few moments to show you that this is closer than ever. The technology to implant a biochip into each American is now here, and there are those in America planning the date when we shall be asked to accept one in our body. This is a picture of just one of those biochips showing you just how big it is. That is, of course, an American 10-cent piece or dime to the right, and the biochip is on the left. so it is not very big. This is a tape being put on to an Illinois license plate as a means of identifying the automobile. This biochip is being implanted into the surface skin of the dog or a cat, in this case a white puppy. This is a slide of a veterinarian using the scanning device to read the number of this particular dog. This is a part of the driver's license that has been computer scanned so that the young woman's picture and her thumbprint can be identified by the scanner. This is the biochip so small that it disappears on top of this particular thumb. This is the device attached to the windshield of a car so that a passing satellite can identify it from miles out in space. And here we see the recording device on a major highway. The U-shaped metal device over the highway will read the number in the windshield as each car passes underneath it. The biochip is already being used on dogs and cats in Los Angeles County, where it is mandatory that all owners are required to have their animals implanted with the biochip. This is a copy of an article written in the San Diego Union newspaper for November the 9th, 1991, announcing the details of the program to implant the dogs and the cats. This is a copy of an article in the April 2nd, 1989 Marin Independent Journal, a California newspaper that was written to discuss the details of this new biochip. The article quotes Tim Willard of the World Future Society, he's an executive officer, as saying this: conceivably, a number could be assigned at birth and go with a person throughout life. Most likely, it would be implanted on the back of the right or left hand for convenience. It could be used as a universal identification card that would replace credit cards, passports, and that sort of thing. At the checkout stand as a supermarket, you would simply pass your hand over a scanner and your bank account would automatically be debited. Now this is an actual biochip, in this particular case in a plastic case. You'll see it's not even a little over a 1/4 inch long. And this is the actual biochip itself outside of a plastic case there on this piece of kind of orange paper. And this is the injector needle, the device that is currently being used to inject an animal with the biochip. And as we have seen, it could be used to inject humans in the near future. But even as bad and as impossible as all of this talk about the elimination of the old world order sounds, I want you to know the new world order is already in place in communist China. It's already here. China has had a strong 6,000-year-old tradition of family and religion, but all of that has been eliminated by the communist government in China, right now, today, in China. Couples are separated, are married by the state and then separated. All married men live together with the other married men. Married women live with other married women. Couples may see each other on Saturday mornings for 3 hours between 9 and noon. In other words, there is no family unit anywhere on the communes in China. If the married couple wants children, they are permitted by the government to have one child. But that child is taken away from the parents shortly after birth and raised by the commune. The parents are allowed one Saturday morning visit with their child from 9 to noon, but if the parents show any affection during that visit, the parents will be allowed no further visits with their child. Chinese tradition states that the oldest child is to provide for his parents when they become old. So if that one child that they are allowed to have by the communist government is female, the parents oftentimes kill that baby and then take her dead body to the Communist Party and then turn her in so that they can obtain another permit for a child. And the result is predictable. There are more little boys than there are little girls. This is not a good sign for the future because the Chinese won't be able to keep their population at an even keel if they can't find enough women to produce offspring. The article says this, that for a bribe of $50, a doctor will tell whether a Chinese woman is pregnant with a boy or a girl. Then, if the pregnant woman finds out it is a girl, the parent gets an abortion. In other words, they want young boy children and not girl children. The article pointed out that the sex ratio of newborn children in China last year reached 119 boys for every 100 girls. And it went on to point out that more than 12% of all female babies were aborted. So in China, the family is making decisions to kill babies just because they are the wrong sex. And the reason they are doing that is because the communist state